The year was 1883, and a cold wind moved across the hills of Ashford Estate as though it carried news no one wished to hear. The old Duke had been buried only weeks earlier, yet the grief hanging over the estate had already begun to give way to something harder and more dangerous. Accounts were overdue. Tenants complained. Managers argued in hushed corridors. Businesses that had once flourished under steady leadership now struggled beneath uncertainty. Among them all, one failure stood out like a cracked stone in a grand cathedral: the estate bakery. Its ovens rarely burned at full heat. Its shelves stood half empty. Flour vanished from storage without explanation. Customers who had once traveled miles for fresh bread now bought from neighboring villages instead. Every ledger told the same story. Loss followed loss, month after month, year after year. Most people believed the bakery was beyond saving. Sebastian Ashford, the new Duke, heard those opinions daily. At 29, he had inherited a title, thousands of acres, and responsibilities heavier than any ceremony could reveal. He possessed sharp features, a disciplined mind, and a reputation for demanding excellence from everyone around him. Since his father's death, he had slept little and trusted even less. Every decision seemed to bring another problem to his door. One gray morning, he stood beside the bakery courtyard reviewing financial reports while two estate managers offered their conclusions. "Close it," one said. "The losses are embarrassing." "The workers have grown careless," said the other. "No manager lasts more than a few months." Sebastian studied the figures without expression. The numbers were worse than he expected. He folded the papers. "Then perhaps," he replied, "the problem is not only the workers." Neither manager answered. Across the courtyard, laborers carried sacks with little urgency. A cracked window rattled in the wind. The bakery looked less like a business and more like a building waiting for permission to die. That same afternoon, a young woman arrived at the estate gates. Her name was Evelyn Hartwell. She carried a small suitcase worn by years of travel and wore a simple blue dress that revealed nothing of wealth or privilege. Yet there was something striking about her composure. She neither hurried nor hesitated. While other applicants often arrived eager to impress, Evelyn seemed guided by quiet certainty. The gatekeeper directed her toward the estate office. Inside, clerks sorted documents while applicants waited for interviews. Most avoided eye contact. Evelyn sat calmly near a window and watched rain gather on the glass. When her turn came, she answered every question with direct honesty. Yes, she had experience in baking. Yes, she understood inventory management. Yes, she could read financial records. No, she had no references from recent employers. The clerk frowned. "Why not?" "My father passed away," Evelyn said gently. "After his business failed, I worked where I could." The answer earned a brief nod before the clerk returned to his papers. By chance, Sebastian entered the office moments later. He intended only to collect documents, but the conversation caught his attention. The young woman's voice carried neither self-pity nor nervousness. She spoke with unusual confidence. When their eyes met, she held his gaze respectfully but without fear. Sebastian found that irritating. Too many people performed confidence they had not earned. He had seen ambitious men hide incompetence behind polished words. Something about Evelyn reminded him of them. "What position are you seeking?" he asked. "Any honest work, Your Grace." "Any work. If I can be useful." The answer sounded simple. Yet there was conviction beneath it. Sebastian studied her for several seconds. "Come with me." The clerks exchanged surprised glances as Evelyn followed him across the estate. Rain had stopped, leaving the pathways slick beneath fading afternoon light. They walked in silence until the bakery appeared ahead. Its stone walls seemed tired. Smoke no longer rose regularly from its chimneys. Several workers stood outside talking instead of working. Evelyn observed everything. The broken sign. The neglected windows. The lack of customers. She said nothing. Sebastian noticed. "Do you know what building this is?" "The bakery." "And what do you think of it?" She considered before answering. "I think people stopped believing in it." The response caught him off guard. Most applicants would have spoken about equipment or profit. She had spoken about belief. Even so, he remained unconvinced. "Interesting," he said. "Everyone else believes it should be closed. Do you?" "I believe results matter." Evelyn nodded slowly. "As do I." Again that confidence. Again that certainty. By now, Sebastian was determined to test it. Inside the bakery, conditions were even worse. Workers barely acknowledged their arrival. One man pretended not to hear instructions from a supervisor. Another quietly slipped flour into a sack hidden beneath a table. The air smelled of stale grain and wasted opportunity. Evelyn walked among the ovens. She examined counters worn smooth by decades of labor. She noticed recipe boards covered in dust. She studied workers whose expressions carried resignation more than pride. The bakery felt wounded. Not dead. Wounded. Sebastian watched her carefully. "Tell me," he said, "can this place be saved?" Several workers laughed. One muttered, "Not by her." Another shook his head. Evelyn ignored them. "Yes." The answer arrived instantly. No hesitation. No qualification. Simply yes. Laughter spread through the room. Sebastian almost smiled. There it was. The arrogance he suspected. Or perhaps foolishness. Either way, he decided to expose it. "Very well," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You believe the bakery can be saved." The workers turned toward him. Silence settled. Sebastian continued. "Then I appoint you manager." The room erupted with disbelief. A woman dropped a mixing bowl. Several workers stared openly. One elderly baker nearly laughed himself breathless. Evelyn herself looked surprised. "Your Grace. You said it can be saved." "I did." "Then prove it." The challenge sharpened his voice. "You have 6 months. Restore profitability. Restore reputation. Restore order. If you succeed, you keep your position. And if I fail? Then you leave this estate forever." The words hung heavily in the air. Workers exchanged amused glances. To them the outcome seemed obvious. The bakery had defeated experienced managers for years. What chance did a young stranger possess? Yet Evelyn did not retreat. She looked around the room. She saw mockery, doubt, expectation of failure. Then she looked back at Sebastian. "I accept." The laughter returned even louder. By evening, rumors had spread throughout Ashford Estate. Servants discussed the decision in kitchens. Stable hands repeated it in barns. Managers called it madness. The Duke had handed a dying business to an unknown woman. Most predicted she would quit before winter. Only Sebastian remained outwardly indifferent. Still, curiosity lingered. The next morning, before sunrise, he rode past the bakery on horseback. A single lamp glowed inside. Someone was already working. He slowed his horse. Through the window, he glimpsed Evelyn alone among shelves and ovens. She was not baking. She was reading. Hours later, after workers arrived, she continued searching through forgotten cabinets and storage rooms. Near the back of the building stood an old cupboard that had not been opened in years. Dust covered every surface. Broken ledgers filled its shelves. While sorting through them, Evelyn discovered a narrow journal hidden behind loose boards. Her breath caught. The worn leather cover looked familiar. Carefully she opened it. Inside were handwritten recipes, notes, measurements, and observations recorded in a script she recognized instantly. Her father's. For a long moment, the noise of the bakery disappeared. She remembered flour on his sleeves. The warmth of childhood mornings. The pride in his voice when he spoke of honest craftsmanship. Then she heard footsteps. An elderly baker named Thomas approached. "What have you found?" Evelyn handed him the journal. His eyes widened. He turned several pages. Then another. Emotion softened his weathered face. "I know this handwriting," he whispered. "You do. Your father helped train me when I was young." Evelyn stared at him. Thomas carefully closed the journal and returned it. "The finest baker I ever met," he said. "And if these recipes are truly his, this bakery may have more hope than any of us imagined." That evening, as shadows stretched across the courtyard, Sebastian watched workers leave for home. He expected discouragement, complaints, perhaps signs that his experiment was already collapsing. Instead, he saw Evelyn standing alone beside the bakery door, her father's journal pressed against her chest. The wind tugged gently at her hair as she looked toward the darkening village beyond the estate. There was determination in her expression now, deeper than confidence and stronger than pride. And when people remember Ashford, they will remember the bread, the workers, and every family whose hopes rose beside these ovens once more after years of neglect. And when Thomas asked what she intended to do next, she answered without lowering her gaze. "I will not merely save this bakery," she said. "I will make it famous." The promise Evelyn Hartwell made outside the bakery spread through Ashford Estate faster than any official announcement. By the following morning, workers repeated her words with amused disbelief. No one expected a young woman with a worn suitcase and an old journal to succeed where others had failed. Evelyn arrived before dawn on her first full day in charge. The village still slept beneath a pale sky when she unlocked the bakery door. Cold air lingered inside the building. The ovens were dark. The silence felt heavy, yet she welcomed it. Silence allowed observation, and observation revealed truths that noise often concealed. Rather than issuing orders, she began cleaning. She swept flour from neglected corners, organized ledgers, and inspected shelves. By sunrise, several workers entered expecting speeches and instructions. Instead, they found their new manager scrubbing work tables beside them. The sight confused them. "Managers usually stand and point," one apprentice remarked. "Then perhaps they miss important things," Evelyn replied. The answer earned a few reluctant smiles. Throughout the morning she worked alongside everyone. She kneaded dough until her hands ached. She carried sacks of flour. She listened more than she spoke. Most people were unaccustomed to being heard. An aging baker named Martha explained that deliveries frequently arrived late because suppliers no longer trusted the bakery. A young apprentice admitted that many workers stopped caring because every previous manager blamed them for failures they had not caused. Another employee confessed that recipes had not changed in years because innovation was discouraged. Evelyn listened carefully to each story. Patterns emerged. The bakery did not suffer from a lack of skill. It suffered from a lack of faith. Years of disappointment had convinced people that effort no longer mattered. That realization changed everything. Instead of announcing punishments, Evelyn focused on restoring pride. She repaired schedules so shifts felt fair. She reorganized responsibilities according to strengths rather than habit. She thanked workers when they performed well. For the first time in years, employees began feeling visible. Days passed. The bakery slowly awakened. Using recipes from her father's journal, Evelyn introduced breads rich with texture and flavor. She revived forgotten techniques that filled the building with aromas strong enough to drift into nearby streets. Curiosity returned before customers did. Then came the first breakthrough. One morning a young mother entered carrying 2 children. She purchased a loaf and returned the next day for another. By the end of the week, several neighboring families followed her example. The workers noticed. Hope, once absent, appeared in cautious fragments. Evelyn understood that bread alone would not secure loyalty. She needed the bakery to matter again. After closing each evening, unsold bread was delivered to struggling families. No announcements accompanied the gesture. Soon people spoke of the bakery differently. Not as a failing business. As a place that cared. The change reached Sebastian Ashford. At first, he monitored progress only through reports. Numbers improved slightly, but he assumed the gains were temporary. Workers were arriving early. Complaints were decreasing. Customers were returning. Sebastian found the transformation difficult to explain. One afternoon, curiosity drew him toward the bakery. He entered quietly and remained unnoticed near the rear wall. The atmosphere surprised him immediately. The building no longer felt defeated. Conversations flowed between workers. Ovens glowed with steady heat. Fresh bread lined wooden racks. Even laughter echoed occasionally through the room. At the center of it all stood Evelyn. She was speaking with an apprentice who appeared upset about a mistake. Rather than criticizing him, she demonstrated the technique again and encouraged him to try once more. The young man's confidence visibly returned. Sebastian watched the exchange longer than intended. Leadership, he realized, looked different than he expected. Before leaving, he purchased a loaf anonymously through a servant. That evening he tasted it alone. The crust cracked perfectly beneath his fingers. The flavor reminded him of harvest seasons from childhood. When his steward asked whether it was good, Sebastian answered with practiced restraint. "It is acceptable." The steward nearly smiled. News of growing success spread beyond Ashford. Travelers from neighboring villages began visiting. Children gathered outside windows to watch bakers work. Small victories accumulated week after week. The workers changed alongside the bakery. People who once expected closure now debated future expansion. Apprentices competed to improve techniques. Employees who had hidden mistakes started offering solutions instead. Evelyn encouraged every contribution. Her greatest gift was not expertise, was attention. She remembered names. She remembered worries. She remembered dreams people had nearly abandoned. In return, they gave her trust. As summer deepened, the bakery's busiest day arrived unexpectedly. A local festival filled nearby roads with visitors. From sunrise until evening, customers formed lines stretching beyond the courtyard. Bread sold faster than workers could bake it. Exhaustion touched everyone. Yet joy accompanied it. When the final customer departed, applause erupted inside the bakery. For many it felt like witnessing a miracle. That night, Evelyn remained after everyone else had gone home. She sat alone reviewing accounts beneath the warm glow of a single lamp. The figures told a remarkable story. Expenses remained high. Challenges remained real. But for the first time in a decade, revenue exceeded costs. The bakery had earned a profit. Not a fortune. Not a complete victory. A beginning. Footsteps sounded behind her. She looked up to find Sebastian standing in the doorway. For a moment neither spoke. Then he glanced toward the ledger and saw the numbers himself. The silence that followed carried more weight than congratulations. Weeks earlier he had expected failure. Now proof rested before them both. The impossible challenge was no longer impossible, and the woman he had dismissed was steadily transforming everything she touched. As Evelyn closed the ledger, Sebastian realized the bakery was not the only thing changing. Something about her success unsettled certainties he had trusted for years, and for the first time since becoming Duke, he found himself wondering not whether she would fail, but how far she might rise still. Success changed Ashford Bakery faster than anyone expected. What had begun as a desperate experiment was becoming one of the most talked about stories in the county. Farmers altered their routes to stop at the bakery before returning home. Merchants carried loaves to neighboring towns. Visitors arrived simply to see whether the rumors were true. Most left carrying bread. Many returned with friends. By late summer, the once forgotten building stood alive with activity from dawn until evening. The workers moved with purpose now. The ovens rarely cooled. The scent of fresh bread drifted across the estate like an invitation. And at the center of it all stood Evelyn Hartwell. Yet success brought attention, and attention often attracted danger. The first sign arrived in the form of a black carriage rolling through the estate gates on a bright afternoon. Its polished surface reflected sunlight like dark glass. Servants hurried to greet the visitor. Within minutes, word spread through Ashford Manor. Lord Victor Blackthorne had arrived. His reputation preceded him. He was wealthy, influential, and admired in business circles throughout England. Newspapers praised his investments. Politicians welcomed his support. To most people he appeared the image of respectable success. Sebastian received him courteously. As Duke he had little choice. The two men spoke briefly before Victor requested a tour of the estate. When they reached the bakery, Sebastian noticed something unusual. Victor stopped walking. For a fraction of a second, genuine surprise crossed his face. His eyes fixed on Evelyn. And Evelyn, standing beside a delivery cart, suddenly went pale. The reaction vanished almost instantly. Both recovered their composure. Yet Sebastian saw enough to recognize that the two already knew each other. Victor approached with a pleasant smile. "Miss Hartwell." Evelyn's expression remained calm. "Lord Blackthorne." The exchange lasted only seconds, but tension lingered afterward like distant thunder. That evening, Sebastian found himself thinking about the encounter. He had never seen Evelyn unsettled before. The memory stayed with him. Meanwhile, Evelyn struggled to ignore memories she had spent years burying. As a child, she had often heard her father speak about competitors, suppliers, and investors. Most names had faded with time. One never had. Victor Blackthorne. The man had once appeared frequently in conversations whispered behind closed doors. Soon after, her father's bakery had collapsed. She remembered unpaid debts that had appeared without explanation, contracts that suddenly vanished, friends who stopped returning letters. Then came bankruptcy, loss, and eventually heartbreak. Her father never fully recovered. Now, after all those years, the same man stood within sight of the bakery she was rebuilding. The coincidence felt impossible. Days later, preparations began for the county baking competition. Winning would bring prestige and customers. Losing would change little. Yet for Evelyn the event represented something deeper. It offered a chance to prove that her father's methods still held value. The competition drew talented bakers from across the region. Crowds gathered beneath colorful banners. Judges sampled dozens of creations. Many competitors dismissed Evelyn immediately. She lacked noble connections. She represented a bakery once considered a failure. Their confidence faded as judging progressed. Recipe after recipe impressed the panel. When results were announced, applause erupted across the grounds. Ashford Bakery had won. The victory sent excitement through the estate. Workers celebrated late into the evening. Thomas openly wept. Even Sebastian found himself smiling. For Evelyn, however, the moment carried unexpected sadness. She wished her father could have seen it. Perhaps that was why she remained alone after the celebrations ended. She sat beneath a large oak tree overlooking golden fields stretching toward the horizon. The setting sun painted the landscape with warm light. Footsteps approached. Sebastian appeared beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable. "Congratulations," he finally said. "Thank you. You earned it." She looked toward the distant hills. "My father would have liked today." The admission softened her voice. Sebastian nodded. "Thomas told me about him." For several moments only the wind moved between them. Then Sebastian surprised her. "When we first met, I believed confidence meant arrogance." Evelyn glanced at him. "And now?" "Now I believe I was wrong." The words carried sincerity. Not the politeness of a duke. The honesty of a man. Something shifted quietly between them. Not a declaration. Not yet. Simply understanding. Over the following weeks, Sebastian found himself seeking reasons to visit the bakery. Sometimes he discussed deliveries. Sometimes finances. Sometimes nothing important at all. Their conversations lengthened. Mutual respect deepened into something neither named. Then another secret emerged. While reviewing estate correspondence, Sebastian discovered a collection of old legal documents connected to the Hartwell family. Curiosity led him deeper. Letters referenced property holdings, business shares, inheritance transfers. The more he read, the more unbelievable the truth became. Several days later, he traveled to London to verify the records. The results confirmed everything. Evelyn Hartwell was not merely the daughter of a ruined baker. Her grandmother had been part owner of one of England's most successful baking companies. Before her death, she had left her entire share to Evelyn. The inheritance was enormous. Larger than many noble fortunes. Larger, in some cases, than portions of Ashford estate itself. Sebastian returned carrying documents that changed everything. When he finally confronted Evelyn, she listened quietly as he explained what he had discovered. To his astonishment, she did not appear surprised. "You already knew," he said. "Yes." "You never claimed it?" "No." "Why?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I needed to know who I was without it." Sebastian stared at her. Most people would have rushed to collect such wealth. Many would have built their entire identity around it. Evelyn had walked away. Not because she lacked ambition. Because she valued something more. The realization left him speechless. Yet neither of them knew that another pair of eyes had been watching. From a distance, Victor Blackthorne observed their growing closeness and rising influence. Every success Evelyn achieved increased the risk surrounding secrets he had hidden for years. The bakery's victory had elevated her reputation. The inheritance could elevate her power. And if she ever learned the full truth behind her father's ruin, everything Victor had built might collapse around him. Standing alone in the fading evening light, he reached a decision that chilled even his own conscience. If Evelyn Hartwell could not be controlled, she would have to be destroyed before she uncovered the past he feared most. Autumn arrived at Ashford Estate carrying the scent of wood smoke and harvest grain. The rebuilt reputation of the bakery had become the pride of the region, and for the first time in many years, optimism seemed stronger than fear. Orders arrived faster than workers could fill them. Merchants competed for contracts. Villagers spoke of the bakery as though it were a living symbol of the estate's renewal. At the center of that transformation stood Evelyn Hartwell. She moved through the bakery with quiet confidence, no longer the stranger who had arrived carrying a single suitcase. The workers trusted her completely now. Apprentices sought her guidance. Customers traveled from distant counties simply to meet the woman whose bread had become famous. Yet success had brought new dangers. Victor Blackthorne watched from the shadows of respectability, hiding his growing desperation behind polite smiles and carefully chosen words. Every week Evelyn's influence expanded. Every week Sebastian's trust in her deepened. Every week the possibility grew that someone would uncover the truth behind the destruction of her father's business. Victor could feel control slipping away, and he was willing to do almost anything to stop it. The annual harvest celebration approached, promising the largest gathering Ashford Estate had hosted in decades. Lanterns were prepared. Musicians were hired. Visitors planned journeys from neighboring counties. The bakery had been chosen as the centerpiece of the festivities. For the workers, it represented vindication after years of humiliation. For Evelyn, it represented proof that people could rebuild what others had abandoned. For Sebastian, it represented something far more personal. During the months they had worked together, his admiration had quietly transformed into affection. He respected her intelligence. He admired her courage. Most of all, he admired her ability to see value in people others overlooked. She had changed the bakery. In many ways she had changed him as well. 3 nights before the celebration, disaster struck. The fire began shortly after midnight. A scream shattered the silence. Moments later, flames burst through the rear windows of the bakery. Within minutes the night sky glowed orange. Bells rang throughout the estate. Workers rushed from their homes. Villagers formed desperate lines carrying buckets of water. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Dry timber crackled. Glass exploded outward. Smoke rolled across the courtyard like a black storm. Sebastian arrived on horseback and immediately saw movement inside the burning building. Several workers remained trapped. Without hesitation, he dismounted and ran toward the entrance. Guards shouted for him to stop. He ignored them. Heat slammed into him as he crossed the threshold. Burning debris fell around him. The air felt impossible to breathe. Yet he pressed forward. One terrified apprentice lay pinned beneath a collapsed beam. Sebastian lifted it with every ounce of strength he possessed. Together they stumbled toward safety. Then he turned back. Again. And again. By the time the final worker emerged, his coat was scorched and his hands blistered. But everyone survived. As dawn approached, the fire finally died. Half the bakery lay in ruins. The sight devastated the workers. Months of labor had vanished in a single night. For many it felt like watching a beloved friend die. The investigation began immediately. Before long, suspicious evidence emerged. A lantern had been found near the rear storage area. Witnesses claimed they had seen one of Evelyn's most loyal workers nearby shortly before the fire. His name was Samuel, a hard-working baker who had supported Evelyn from the beginning. The accusation spread rapidly. Estate officials demanded consequences. Several influential villagers insisted he be arrested. The evidence appeared convincing. Only Evelyn refused to believe it. "I know him," she said firmly. "He would never do this." Others called her naive. Some accused her of favoritism. Still she refused to abandon him. Samuel's reputation crumbled within days. Fear replaced trust. Whispers followed him everywhere. Through it all, Sebastian watched Evelyn stand beside the accused worker despite mounting pressure. The choice impressed him more than any business success. Supporting Samuel risked her own credibility. Yet she would not sacrifice an innocent man for convenience. For the first time, Sebastian openly joined her. "I trust her judgment," he announced before estate officials. The declaration shocked many. Some warned him he was making a mistake. Others questioned his objectivity. He did not retreat. Together, he and Evelyn began examining the evidence themselves. What they discovered raised troubling questions. Witness statements contradicted one another. Timelines failed to align. Certain records appeared altered. Most suspicious of all, someone had gained access to areas of the bakery normally locked after dark. The deeper they investigated, the clearer the pattern became. The fire had not been an accident. It had been sabotage. Their search eventually led them toward financial records connected to suppliers, contracts, and old business agreements. Among those documents appeared a familiar name, Victor Blackthorne. Again and again, his influence touched every trail they followed. The realization stunned Evelyn. For years she had suspected he played a role in her father's downfall. Now evidence suggested his corruption extended far beyond a single business. Sebastian arranged a private inquiry. The results exposed a network of bribery, fraud, intimidation, and forged contracts stretching back decades. Victor had built his fortune by destroying competitors and manipulating markets. The same methods that ruined Evelyn's father had ruined countless others. The harvest celebration arrived beneath dark clouds. Thousands gathered despite recent tragedy. Rumors filled every conversation. At the height of the event, Sebastian stepped onto a platform overlooking the crowd. Evelyn stood beside him. Victor remained nearby, appearing calm. For the moment. Then Sebastian began presenting evidence. Documents. Witness testimony. Financial records. One revelation after another shattered Victor's carefully crafted image. Gasps spread through the audience. Shock turned to outrage. The truth could no longer be denied. Victor attempted to defend himself. No one listened. Years of deception collapsed in a matter of minutes. His influence vanished before the eyes of the very society that once admired him. As authorities moved forward to take him into custody, Victor turned toward Evelyn. Hatred flashed across his face. "You should have remained forgotten," he said. Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "My father deserved justice." "No," Victor replied bitterly. "Your father trusted people. And that," she answered, "is why he was better than you." The crowd erupted in applause. Victor was escorted away. Samuel's innocence was publicly confirmed. His name was restored. The workers celebrated through tears. For a brief moment, victory felt complete. Then another letter arrived. It bore a seal from London. Inside was official confirmation that Evelyn could immediately claim her grandmother's inheritance, including ownership of a vast baking enterprise worth a fortune beyond imagination. The news spread quickly. Congratulations followed. So did assumptions. Everyone knew what such wealth meant. She no longer needed Ashford Estate. She no longer needed the bakery. She no longer needed any of them. That evening, after the crowds dispersed, Sebastian stood alone before the damaged bakery. The rebuilding would begin soon. The future looked brighter than ever. Yet as he watched workers extinguish the last lanterns of the celebration, a different fear settled heavily within him. He had fought beside Evelyn, trusted her, and come to care for her more deeply than he wished to admit. But now the very success he had helped her achieve might take her away forever. And as he unfolded the inheritance letter once more, he realized that winning the battle against Victor Blackthorne had been easier than facing the possibility of losing Evelyn Hartwell. The days following Victor Blackthorne's downfall should have felt triumphant. The truth had been exposed. Samuel's name had been cleared. The workers had reclaimed their pride. Plans for rebuilding the damaged bakery moved forward with remarkable speed. Yet a strange sadness lingered over Ashford Estate. The reason was Evelyn Hartwell. Every conversation eventually returned to the same question. Would she stay? The inheritance awaiting her in London was extraordinary. Newspapers had begun reporting the story. Businessmen sent letters requesting meetings. Investors sought partnerships. Opportunities arrived daily. For the first time in her life, Evelyn possessed enough wealth to shape any future she desired. And everyone assumed that future lay somewhere beyond Ashford. The workers spoke quietly whenever she entered a room. The villagers watched her with uncertain smiles. Even Thomas, who had become like family, seemed reluctant to ask what she intended. Only Sebastian remained silent. Not because he lacked questions, because he feared the answers. The bakery reconstruction progressed throughout autumn. Carpenters repaired walls. Masons strengthened foundations. New ovens arrived from London. Workers volunteered extra hours without pay. No one wanted to lose what they had built together. One evening, Sebastian found Evelyn standing inside the unfinished structure. Sunlight streamed through open beams overhead. Dust drifted through the air like golden mist. For a long moment neither spoke. They had become comfortable with silence. It was one of the many things that had changed between them. "You could leave tomorrow," Sebastian finally said. Evelyn looked toward the new ovens. "I could. You would have every reason." She studied his expression. "You believe that?" "I believe you owe this estate nothing." The answer came from honesty rather than duty. That mattered to her. Evelyn walked slowly across the room. When she spoke, her voice carried quiet conviction. "When I arrived here, I thought I was searching for work." Sebastian listened. "But I was searching for something else." "What?" "A place where people still mattered." His gaze softened. "You found it?" "Yes." The single word remained with him long after she left. Weeks later, invitations began arriving across the county. Not for a wedding. Not for a noble celebration. For something entirely unexpected. Evelyn had requested a gathering unlike any Ashford estate had ever hosted. Preparations spread across villages and towns. Lantern makers worked day and night. Musicians rehearsed. Farmers offered supplies. Families volunteered their time. No one knew exactly what Evelyn planned. Only that she insisted everyone be present. Workers, servants, merchants, children, widows, laborers, everyone. The night finally arrived beneath a clear winter sky. Thousands of lanterns illuminated roads, gardens, courtyards, and rooftops. Warm golden light stretched across the estate like a sea of stars. Visitors traveled from distant counties simply to witness the spectacle. Music floated through the air. Laughter echoed between buildings. Children ran through glowing pathways carrying small lanterns of their own. The rebuilt bakery stood at the center of it all. Larger than before. Stronger than before. More beautiful than anyone imagined possible. Yet the building itself was not the true surprise. As the crowd gathered before a large platform, Evelyn stepped forward. Silence gradually settled. Faces turned toward her. The people who had worked beside her, believed in her, supported her. All waited. Evelyn looked across the crowd. For a brief moment emotion filled her eyes. Then she began speaking. She spoke about opportunity, about dignity, about the value hidden inside ordinary people. She spoke about her father. about the lessons he taught her, about the workers who refused to surrender after the fire, about the families who shared hope when hope seemed scarce. Then came the announcement. Using her inheritance, she would establish the Hartwell Academy of Baking and Trade, a school unlike any other. Orphans would learn valuable skills. Widows would receive training and employment. Young apprentices would study business ownership. Families struggling with poverty would gain opportunities previously reserved for the wealthy. The crowd fell silent. Not from confusion, from astonishment. Evelyn was giving away the future most people would have used for themselves. She was transforming wealth into possibility. Tears appeared in many eyes. Thomas openly wept again. Several workers embraced. Mothers held their children closer. The applause that followed seemed endless. Yet Evelyn was not finished. She announced that profits from the bakery would help fund scholarships and community programs. No one would be forgotten. No one would be left behind. The estate that once struggled beneath decline would become a place where people could build new lives. The response was overwhelming. For many, it felt less like a speech and more like a promise that their future mattered. As cheers filled the night, Evelyn stepped aside. Sebastian took her place. The crowd welcomed him warmly. Months earlier, many would have expected a formal speech from their Duke. Instead, they witnessed something entirely different. Sebastian looked across the faces before him. Workers, bakers, families, children. The very people who had rebuilt Ashford alongside Evelyn. His voice remained steady, but emotion lived beneath every word. When I first met Evelyn Hartwell, I believed I was testing her. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. He smiled briefly. I thought I was placing an impossible challenge before a stranger. The laughter faded. Instead, she revealed something I needed to learn. The crowd listened closely. She showed me that leadership is not built upon titles. He paused. It is built upon service. The workers exchanged glances. Many remembered the proud and distant Duke who had once viewed everything through numbers and expectations. That man seemed far away now. Sebastian descended from the platform. Then he did something no one expected. He walked directly into the crowd. Toward the workers. Toward the people who had stood beside Evelyn from the beginning. And there, before thousands of witnesses, he knelt. A collective gasp swept across the estate. Even Evelyn looked stunned. Sebastian lifted his eyes to hers. The silence felt enormous. You were never the test, he said softly. The words carried through the stillness. I was. Emotion tightened his voice. And I nearly failed it. Many in the crowd wiped away tears. Others simply watched in awe. Sebastian continued. You taught me to trust people again. His gaze never left hers. You taught me courage. A faint smile touched Evelyn's lips. You taught me what kind of Duke I should become. Then came the question everyone already felt approaching. Will you share the rest of that journey with me? For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Lanterns flickered. Snow drifted lightly from the sky. Thousands waited. Evelyn looked around the crowd. At Thomas. At Samuel. At the workers. At the families whose lives had changed alongside her own. Then she looked back at Sebastian. Yes. The answer unleashed an explosion of celebration. Cheers echoed across the estate. Music resumed. Children danced. Workers embraced one another. Yet Evelyn offered one final surprise. She accepted Sebastian's proposal. But she refused to become a traditional duchess in the old sense. They would lead together. As partners. As equals. And because success belonged to everyone who had helped create it, bakery ownership shares would be distributed among the workers themselves. The announcement generated another wave of astonishment. Men and women who had once feared losing their livelihoods suddenly became owners of the future they helped build. The celebration continued deep into the night. Years passed. The academy expanded across England. Former orphans became respected master bakers. Widows opened successful businesses. Communities copied Ashford's model. The bakery became nationally famous. Yet the greatest achievement could not be measured in profits or recognition. It lived in people. One summer evening many years later, another festival of 1,000 lights illuminated Ashford Estate. Lanterns stretched farther than ever before. Children raced through glowing pathways. Families filled every courtyard with laughter. Near the rebuilt bakery, now the heart of a thriving community, an elderly Thomas sat beside Evelyn watching the celebration unfold. What was the secret ingredient? He asked. She smiled. Beyond them stood generations of people whose lives had been changed by a single decision to believe in one another. Sebastian stood nearby with their children, laughing as lanterns rose into the night sky. Evelyn looked across the crowd, across the academy, across the estate that had once tested her worth. Then she answered. It was never the bread. Thomas nodded knowingly. Evelyn's eyes shone with quiet happiness. It was always the people. At that moment, thousands of lanterns ascended together, rising toward the stars like dreams finally set free. Fireworks burst across the sky in brilliant gold and silver. Cheers echoed through the night. And as Sebastian took Evelyn's hand, surrounded by the community they had built together, the story reached its true ending. Not a marriage, not a fortune, and not a bakery's success, but a legacy that transformed thousands of lives and turned one forgotten corner of England into a beacon of hope for generations to come.